Hey guys, CJ here from Elevated Systems, and when Chuwi reached out and asked if I wanted to check out one of their laptops, it just so happened I needed a new 11-inch 2-in-1 to replace my aging HP Pavilion X2 as my teleprompter display and portable scripting system. And for the past couple months, it's been performing great in that role. But as specific as my use case is, today we're evaluating the Chuwi MiniBook X as a general purpose 2-in-1 mini laptop. We'll examine its specs and features, build quality and materials, assess its display, keyboard, trackpad, camera, microphone, speakers, as well as its performance, battery life, thermals, and noise levels. And as always, I'll wrap up with my final thoughts on the value of the MiniBook X. So stay tuned.
It's the money.
Let's dive into the specs and features of the Chuwi MiniBook X. This compact laptop measures 244 millimeters by 166.4 millimeters and reaches up to 17.2 millimeters at its thickest point. It tips the scales at about 920 grams. Under the hood, it's equipped with an Intel 12th Gen N100 4-core CPU. Graphics are handled by integrated Intel UHD graphics. Memory-wise, it packs 12 gigabytes of LPDDR5 operating at 4,800 megatransfers per second. For connectivity, it offers integrated Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth 5.2. Storage comes in the form of a 512 gigabyte socketed NVMe M.2 SSD, ensuring swift and upgradable space for all your files. Power supplied by a 28.88 watt-hour 2-cell lithium-ion battery. The MiniBook X flaunts a 10.5-inch 1920 by 1200 multi-touch IPS display, topped off with a hole-punch 5-megapixel webcam. There's a full-width 78-key backlit keyboard and 3.6-inch touchpad. Port selection includes 2 USB-C ports. The rear port supports USB power delivery and data speeds up to 5 gigabits per second, while the front is a full-feature USB 3.2 Gen 1. This port supports USB PD, 5 gigabit per second transfer, as well as alternate DisplayPort and audio modes. Additionally, there's a 3.5 millimeter headset jack. Lastly, the MiniBook X comes with a 45-watt, 12-volt USB-C charger and is currently priced at $350 US. So that's a quick overview of the specs and features, but let's dive deeper into each one, starting with the materials and build quality. The MiniBook X features an aluminum alloy top and bottom panel, while the bottom shell is made from injection molded plastic. The top panel is impressively rigid, exhibiting practically zero vertical or lateral flex. The input deck does have some vertical flex, but again, no lateral flex. Overall, the laptop feels very solid and surprisingly rugged. In fact, it survived a drop from about 3 feet into rocks, and it only sustained a couple of tiny dings. The anodized finish feels premium and is almost completely fingerprint resistant. Moreover, the finishes of the aluminum and plastic match perfectly, giving it a cohesive look. At the top of the screen, you'll find a 5-megapixel hole-punch webcam with a resolution of 1920 by 1200. Now, the original version of the MiniBook X, which is still available, claimed to feature the world's first hole-punch display. Frankly, that's just marketing fluff. My HP Pavilion from 2015 had a hole-punch display too, but let's not dwell on that. So this is the raw audio and video from the built-in webcam and microphone, and it's not that bad, especially for a tiny hole-punch camera. The color accuracy is a little bit off in the background, is overexposed, but the resolution is pretty good, and there's a lot less noise in the video than I expected. The audio is pretty clear. My budgies are chirping in the background pretty loudly. I'm not sure how that's coming through, but overall, it's pretty good for a $350 laptop. One issue worth noting is the absence of an indicator light to show when the camera is active. This is a small but crucial detail, especially for those concerned with privacy and wanting to know at a glance if the camera is on. Moving on to the display, with a resolution of 1920 by 1200, this display offers a nice 16 by 10 aspect ratio and a pixel density of 215 ppi, which looks perfectly sharp and is crisp on a 10.5-inch screen. It's a 50Hz multi-touch display boasting smooth gesture support both on the desktop and in all supported apps. The color gamut measured at 94% of the sRGB spectrum. However, right out of the box with nightlight and other Windows display altering settings disabled, the tone leaned on the cool side and the colors appeared slightly washed out, necessitating a significant calibration correction. So while accurate color reproduction is achievable, Chuwi could certainly improve their default calibration. A notable issue with the display is the combination of its glossy finish and a maximum brightness of just 200 nits, though mine measured at about 218 nits. Using the device outside in full sunlight is next to impossible. There have even been times when it was too bright inside my truck to see the screen clearly. Now, the standout feature of the MiniBook X is the keyboard. Despite the laptop's compact size, Chuwi managed to include an almost full-size keyboard. Personally, I appreciate their design choice. They maintained full-size alphanumeric keys while reducing the size of the command, navigation, modifier, and system keys. In fact, the alphanumeric keys are a full 15 millimeters squared with 1.5 millimeters travel. Since I primarily use this laptop for word processing, like typing documents, it suits my needs perfectly. I don't notice a big difference when switching from typing on my Framework or MacBook to the MiniBook. The backlight is a nice touch, especially since I spend a lot of time in my dark truck waiting for my kids' practice or extracurricular activities to end. Not a creepy guy, just Uber dad, but the backlight is handy. It features 2 illumination levels, and I find the lowest setting fine for almost any situation. It also has a nice auto timing feature that shuts off 30 seconds after you stop typing. This probably saves less than a watt of power, but every little bit helps. The only minor gripe I have, if I'm being nitpicky, is that the chiclet style keys have a slight amount of lateral wiggle. One trade-off with the larger keyboard is the reduced size of the trackpad. It functions well, supports full multi-gesture control, and has a solid click with defined right and left click areas. It's relatively smooth, but honestly, it's too small to be truly useful for me. Combined with virtually non-existent palm, or in this case, thumb rejection, as the size of the input deck means your thumbs rest on the trackpad when your hands are in the home position, I often just turn the trackpad off. Fortunately, the MiniBook X has an excellent touchscreen. It's very accurate and responsive. I can scroll, pan, zoom, select, drag, switch apps and desktops. Anything I can do on a multi-gesture touchpad, I can do on the MiniBook touchscreen. The only issue arises when I switch back to my Framework or MacBook and find myself swiping at their non-responsive screens. The built-in speakers are about as loud as my iPhone 15 Pro Max, but they have a tinny quality. The soundstage is heavily skewed towards the higher frequencies and lacks bass response. Overall, they're not bad for what they are. In terms of Wi-Fi performance speeds, we're about 100 megabits per second slower than the speeds tested on my MacBook under similar conditions. However, I had no issues with Bluetooth connectivity. My Bluetooth earbuds connected. I managed to walk downstairs and about 20 feet outside my front door before the connection started to drop, which is about the norm for most laptops I've tested. When it comes to expandability, the rear USB-C port is basically a glorified charging point with 5 gigabit data transfer speeds, while the front port is a full-feature USB-C port. Using this port, I've charged the MiniBook using a 100-watt USB-C charger. In terms of real-world data transfer rates, it managed about 370 megabytes per second. Using a USB-C to DisplayPort cable, it had no trouble driving a 4K 60Hz display. Let's dive into performance, but first, it's important to touch on the MiniBook CPU. The N100 is an Intel 12th gen processor. Normally, 12th gen CPUs have a mix of performance cores, powerful multi-threaded ones, and efficiency cores, smaller non-multi-threaded ones. The N100 has just 4 of these efficiency cores. Theoretically, this offers a balance between performance, power consumption, and heat. However, this also means the MiniBook X isn't a high performance laptop. Don't expect to do advanced video editing, 3D rendering, complex code compilation, or AAA gaming on it. That said, productivity tasks, web browsing, media consumption, and casual entertainment are well within its capabilities. For this reason, I stuck to realistic device-appropriate testing for the MiniBook X. The main benchmark I used was the ProCyan Office Productivity Test, which simulates realistic scenarios in Microsoft Excel, Word, PowerPoint, and Outlook. The MiniBook X scored 3,749 points, but what does that really mean? For context, I ran the same test on my Framework 13, which also has a 12th gen CPU, the i7-1260p, featuring 4 performance and 8 efficiency cores. It scored 5,421 points, which is about 45% better, but considering that laptop costs 3 times as much as the Chuwi, the MiniBook X performs admirably. When digging into the individual tasks, which are time to completion, most differences come down to fractions of a second. Unless you're doing heavy image manipulation in Word, exporting presentations to PDF or video, or running large query tables with multiple pages of data in Excel, you likely won't notice any significant slowdowns in basic everyday productivity tasks. The MiniBook X is also capable of basic photo editing in Photoshop and Lightroom. Unfortunately, the ProCyan test seems to have a bug that prevents it from returning a score. This even happened on my Framework laptop. Still, the test did complete, involving some large batch corrections in Lightroom and advanced manipulations in Photoshop. I was actually impressed it made it through the entire test as smoothly and quickly as it did. I should also mention that the display does support a stylus. I even bought the Chuwi H8 stylus pen to try out. Unfortunately, I accidentally plugged it into the wrong USB-C charger and the magic smoke was released. So I didn't get to thoroughly test it on camera. However, before I fried it, I did some testing and honestly, it wasn't great. I couldn't get the pen pressure to function in Krita or Photoshop, and taking handwritten notes in OneNote in tablet mode wasn't great either. There was too much lag and it missed strokes or even entire letters. The display also lacks palm rejection, which makes using a stylus more challenging and awkward than it's worth, in my opinion. Outside of work, this little 2-in-1 is also great for media consumption, capable of streaming from your preferred service without issue. The various configurations are handy for this, although the limited screen brightness can be challenging. Trying to watch a darker scene in a brightly lit area can be tough. Now, because I know my audience is wondering, can it game, bro? The answer is, it depends on the game. You won't be jumping into battle with your squad in Warzone or cruising the streets of Night City on the MiniBook. The integrated UHD graphics can't handle AAA gaming, even on the lowest settings. However, for the more casual gamer, arcade-style games are definitely an option. I've been wanting to try out RimWorld for a while, so I installed it and ran through the tutorial without any problems. I also jumped into a free-for-all in Brawlhalla, and other than my own inability to handle keyboard and mouse in this game, it ran perfectly on the MiniBook X. Switch to tablet mode and you have nearly the full catalog of Windows and, until next year, Android mobile game libraries. Based on my previous testing on a mini PC, the N100 is also really good at emulating some classic console games. So to round out the performance overview, let's talk about thermal sound and battery performance of the MiniBook X. The N100 has a maximum operating temperature of 105 degrees Celsius, which is crazy high for an efficiency CPU. However, Chuwi's active cooling system with its copper heatsink keeps the CPU package temperature to just 75 degrees under full load on both the CPU and integrated GPU. This cooling system is also very effective at dissipating the heat out of the laptop. With the stress test running or during gaming, plenty of hot air exits through the left side vent while the input deck is barely warm to the touch. And it accomplishes this relatively quietly, as the fan is usually barely audible. However, I did notice quite a bit of coil whine-like noise coming from the laptop, which spikes the decibel level at times. This happens under load and even during normal tasks. However, this issue only seems to occur when the laptop is plugged in and on best performance mode. When unplugged, the high-pitched whine is absent. Lastly, I saved the worst for last. The battery life of the Chuwi MiniBook X is disappointing, lasting a maximum of only 5 hours and 18 minutes in the ProCyan productivity battery life test, which cycles between basic office tasks in the Microsoft Office suite and idle. One of the most important factors in an ultra-portable 2-in-1 mini laptop is battery life. It needs to last through an entire work or school day. My old HP lasted over 8 hours a decade ago when I got it, and now because it only lasts about 5 hours, it was one of the reasons I wanted to replace it. The lack of full day battery life will likely be a deal breaker for most digital nomads considering the MiniBook X. Now, this isn't entirely Chuwi's fault. The blame falls mostly on Intel. The N100 is supposed to be a super efficient chip with great performance per watt, but unfortunately, it's not. It performs well for what it is, but that comes at the expense of efficiency. It's supposed to be a 6-watt chip, but regularly draws more than double that power. Bottom line, Intel's efficiency cores aren't all that efficient, and without a competitive AMD or ARM64 option yet, manufacturers have no choice but the N95 or N100 for low power systems like the MiniBook X. It's unfortunate as the inefficiency ruins an otherwise pretty good 2-in-1 mini laptop for many potential users. Now, as a reviewer, I can only evaluate the product in front of me at that time. However, with companies I'm not very familiar with like Chuwi, I make sure to do my due diligence and research the company itself. I don't want to recommend a good product from a problematic company. In my research on Chuwi, the general consensus is that their products are budget-friendly focused and generally good within that category. There are some problems and defects with some of their products, but nothing outside the norm. The biggest issue I found is their less than ideal customer service. Most customers' frustration is directed at Chuwi's support system, which has been described as slow to respond and sometimes unhelpful. Repairs often need to be sent to international locations at the customer's expense. This has even led to discussion among users about the potential for a class action lawsuit due to the recurring nature of these defects and the perceived lack of adequate support. Now, to be clear, this information is based on official forums and customer reviews, which tend to be heavily populated by disgruntled customers, so take some of it with a grain of salt. However, unresponsive or slow customer support is common among many Chinese manufacturers and has even become an issue with US companies that have moved their customer support overseas. So, after looking at the specs, features, build quality, performance, and support of the Chuwi MiniBook X, it's clear that the device has highs and lows. The compact design with an all aluminum alloy top and bottom, full-size keyboard, and versatile display make it a standout option for portability and productivity. It effortlessly handles basic tasks like word processing, web browsing, photo editing, and casual gaming, making a good choice for those needs. On the other hand, its limited screen brightness and tiny speakers can detract from the overall media consumption experience. Additionally, the N100 CPU isn't as power efficient as it promises, leading to a disappointing battery life that falls short of a full work or school day. Furthermore, it's possible Chuwi's customer support has room for improvement. Slow response times and the need for international shipping for repairs could be a significant drawback for potential buyers. So where does the MiniBook X stand in terms of value? If you're on a budget and need a compact 2-in-1 for everyday tasks, it's a decent option. The price is right for the feature set, but you have to be willing to compromise on some key areas. For those who need a long-lasting device for more demanding work, it might be worth considering other options. Ultimately, the Chuwi MiniBook X caters best to casual users looking for an affordable, durable, portable 2-in-1 laptop.